Hey guys, I got a message today, comment on one of my videos from somebody saying, what should you do if you're a D4 player, you like playing, say, the London system, and your opponent replies with E5? What do you do about that? And then, so I thought, well, this is interesting. I will look out and see if I get the opportunity to go into this opening, which is called the Englund Gambit. It's England with a U, not an A, right? So I played, I think, 3 games earlier on with Peter G. Stone from the UK, 13-year-old kid, knocking on 1200 rated now, could be a future star. So we had 3 games. This is the middle game, and I got to play the Englund Gambit. What's more, I got to launch some very tricky traps. So Peter's got the white pieces and I'm playing black, and as soon as I saw D4 I thought, let's go for this. So E5. So it's a gambit, right? So the principles with gambits are, in the majority, that you offer your opponent a pawn or two usually, and while they're busy capturing your pieces, capturing your pawns, then you get the opportunity to develop and ideally launch a tricky attack. So with playing E5 at the start of this, you want to throw the D4 player right off their, whatever it is that they're on, their table, and hope that they capture the pawn. So you're giving up a pawn willingly, but now it means that you get to develop a piece. And now you might argue, actually, in terms of development, in terms of getting out and occupying the board, things aren't quite so much in white's favour. White has no d-pawn now, and never will, unless something else moves across. And white has doubled pawns on the e-file. And this guy in particular on e5 is looking somewhat vulnerable. Now, very often with gambits, what the player who is playing the gambit is banking on is the person who's now got the extra pawn. They're banking on that they will try and defend and hang on to that pawn. As a general rule, you shouldn't do it. Okay, so the knight comes out to attack the pawn. The obvious move is knight to f3 to defend the pawn. And then black now plays queen e7. Unusual opening move, right? I've only developed one minor piece out into the board, and here comes the queen. What's going on? And this is what you want to see if you're playing black and you're playing the Englund Gambit. Okay, so the bishop comes out, and what this means is this pawn's undefended, and of course we've got this nice diagonal here. So what happens next is the queen comes out to b4, and look at what we've got. The queen is attacking the king. The queen is also attacking the dark squared bishop. Now, you might, and it has to be noted, the queen is also attacking b2. So that is a 3-way fork from the queen on the 4th move of the game, right? Now, this game itself only goes on for 7 moves, right? Believe it or not. Okay, so white is in check. The pawn's hanging, the bishop's hanging. There's only one logical move, which is to retreat the bishop now to d2. Now the queen takes b2. Okay, and there are a couple of lines here. One is to bring the bishop to c3, which is, it seems like it makes a lot of sense, and we'll look at that in a second. The other is to bring the knight out here, so that that's a discovered defense, and the queen and the rook are looking after each other, right? But both of them have big problems. So, in the game, then Peter plays knight to c3. And this at first seems like it might be very sensible. However, there is a deadly attack, and one thing that you need to look at is that because this bishop has now retreated back to the d2 square, how many squares does the king have to go to, right? So I now play knight b4, and my knight is looking to come in here to the c2 square, and there really isn't an awful lot that white can do about this. I think probably the best move would be to bring either the queen or the rook to c1 and protect that pawn, which would have been absolutely fine. But white in this case played the knight out to a4 with an attack against my queen, but that's too slow. He's not going to get time to do that because knight takes c2. This is almost a smothered mate, right? The king cannot move. Therefore, there is only one legal move on the board, and that would be queen takes knight, and then he'd lose his queen. Okay, so let's go back a couple of moves. The other one that looks very tempting is bishop to c3. And this looks like it makes an awful lot of sense. The queen can't take the rook because the bishop would take it. Queen can't take the pawn, it's defended by the rook. Queen can't take the knight because it's defended by everybody. Okay, queen can't take the pawn because it's defended by the queen. So what's black got? Well, here comes another piece. Bang. Bishop to b4. Okay, so now this bishop is pinned. It cannot capture the queen. So what do you do in this situation? So say like if knight or whatever comes out here, we've got bishop takes, and that would drop the queen. It's a very, very tricky situation. Bishop comes out here, let's say queen to d2. That looks sensible. Right? This bishop is defended a couple of times, that's fine. And if you take, then queen takes, checkmate on c1. Queen to c1, checkmate. Right? If the knight takes the bishop, the rook drops, check. Okay? And it's a very, very tricky situation. So let's go back to the start. So what should you do? We'll flip the board. Okay, what should you do as white if you're a d4 player? Let's open up another board. Okay, I'm going to do I'll do an analysis board. Okay, so you're white and you're a d4 player and your opponent plays e5. So this is kind of similar to the Scandinavian defense, but the other way around. Scandinavian is e4, d5. But the general response is the same. You can capture the pawn, and then when your opponent plays the knight out here, forget about the pawn. That would be my advice. I mean, yeah, you could play knight to f3. It's a normal developing move, but stick to your opening principles. This is the whole point of gambits, that your opponent is trying to get you to make moves that are not normal, sound, sensible developing moves. So if you find yourself in a situation where somebody seems to have offered you a pawn, right? Maybe accept the pawn. That's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? But do not try too hard to hang on to your extra pawn, because you can bet that your opponent is banking on that, all right? So now, if you try and defend the pawn and you see the queen come out here, now this is not a sound move for black generally. He's blocked off his dark squared bishop, he's got a valuable piece out on the board too early, and he's not developed anything else. So he's wasted move 3 with a queen move. So what would you do at this point? You could do, for example, you could play bishop out here, you know, pawn takes, knight takes, pinning itself, that's not too bad. You could just carry on with very standard, ordinary, boring developing moves. And you should be absolutely fine. And here you can see that the band has got white 1.5 pawns in front. So in the Englund Gambit specifically, forget about the extra pawn. Right? The same thing goes very often if you're the other way around and you're an e4 player and your opponent plays the Scandinavian and you take the pawn, right? If they play, I mean, the most common one is queen takes and then the queen gets kicked by the knight. But I play the modern variation where the knight attacks the pawn. And you can get into all kinds of trouble here as well. So actually the best move here is d4. Right, just forget about the extra pawn. Don't worry about it. Okay, so there you go. That is for my follower who wanted to know how to respond to the Englund Gambit. And the general rule is, sure, go ahead and take a free pawn if you want to, but then do not be too precious about your extra pawn because your opponent is going to try and use it against you. There you go. Thank you for watching. See you soon.